Hi, and welcome to the Lewiston Tribune Podcast. This is episode number 45. I'm Matt Baney, managing editor of the Lewiston Tribune, and I'm joined today by Anthony Kuipers from the Moscow Pullman Daily News and Kerri Sandaine from the Tribune. Anthony and Kerri were both in Boise on Wednesday for the Bryan Kohberger sentencing hearing, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Obviously, a very emotional event. I guess maybe Anthony, we'll start with you. What are your general takeaways from the hearing yesterday?
Yeah, it was emotionally intense, which I think everyone expected. A lot of representatives from the families were able to give their victim impact statements, and that's always the most heart-wrenching part of a sentencing hearing. But I think in a way it was also kind of cathartic. They got to say everything they wanted to say and pour their hearts out. And ultimately, there were no surprises by the end result. The judge handed down the 4 life sentences, and I think everyone's hoping that this will be kind of the closing of a chapter, and are hoping to move on.
Kerri, what stood out to you about it?
I agree with everything Anthony said. It was emotional and intense, and obviously it was good for the families to have that opportunity to speak. I always think the sentencing hearings are the hardest part of any trial or crime or conclusion.
Mm-hmm. Guys, whose statement really, were there one or a couple of the victim impact statements that really stood out to you? Anthony, which ones kind of really caught your eye?
I think one that's gotten a lot of attention I've seen is the statement from Kaylee Gonsalves's sister, Olivia. She directed her words right at Kohberger, and she did not pull any punches. She didn't mince words. She really directed her very understandable anger and fury at him. And I think for a lot of people who are angry at him, I think her words were, I think she said what a lot of people wanted to say to him.
Let me be very clear. Don't ever try to convince yourself you mattered just because someone finally said your name out loud. I see through you. You want the truth? Here's the one you'll hate the most. If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep, in the middle of the night, like a pedophile, Kaylee would have kicked your. Thank you.
And so I saw that, her comments have been talked about online, and the video of that's been shared online. I think that's probably one of the most memorable moments from yesterday.
Hey, Kerri, which ones did you really take note of?
The obvious ones were the roommate's statements, seeing Dylan for the first time, and just her trauma was so obvious. That was hard to watch. I was proud of her. I know that had to take a lot for her to stand up there in the same room as the defendant and say those things.
He didn't just take them from the world. He took them from me, my friends, my people who felt like my home, the people I looked up to and adored more than anyone.
And, one that probably didn't get as much attention but really struck me was Maddie's dad, Ben Mogan. I really felt his pain. He seemed broken, and he said some things like Maddie was the only thing he was ever proud of, the only great thing he did in his life.
Maddie was my only child that I ever had. Only great thing I ever really did, and the only thing I was really ever proud of. And I thought we would have the rest of our lives together.
I liked him a lot, and also I think it's his mom, Grandma Deedle. She was great. And there was an aunt, and she was the only one who said she felt sorry for Kohberger's family. And I thought that was kind of her. And she said she forgave him because she couldn't live with all of this hate in her heart. So those, I mean, all of them were very special in their own way, every single one of them.
And they really did run the gamut, didn't they?
Mhm.
Like you're talking about, some were angry, some were sad, just all over the map.
Yeah, they all were heartfelt, and I was impressed just with the poise they all had when they stood up there, because I can't even imagine how hard that is to go up there and pour your heart out, and knowing that everyone's watching. And I was just like struck just by how they kept their composure.
And of course, Bryan Kohberger was there to hear it all. And was there ever even a hint of any recognition from him? Did you notice anything, Anthony, that of him acknowledging anybody's statement?
No, I had a good view of him, and there was just nothing, no emotion from him, no facial expression. He did look everyone in the eyes when they were talking to him. He made eye contact with all of them, but there was no indication of any emotion whatsoever. Frankly, it was kind of eerie to watch him.
At the end, of course, he had a chance to make a statement. He didn't. It almost seemed like everybody knew he wasn't going to speak, or was there still some anticipation maybe he might say something?
I was not surprised at all that he didn't speak. I don't know. I would have been shocked if he did. He hasn't spoken much at all throughout this whole process. And it seemed like the judge and Bill Thompson, the prosecutor, they were fine with him not speaking, because they said that, for one, how can you believe anything that comes out of his mouth? And two, I believe Bill Thompson said it would have given him a chance to control the dialogue. And so my sense was that he was okay with Kohberger not speaking.
I think many people wanted him to say something. Even the president of the United States weighed in and wanted him compelled to say what he was doing. Bill Thompson and Judge Hippler both make a good case that you can't trust what he's going to say. So, why bother? And it gives him more attention. But does it still seem a little unsatisfying that we didn't hear from him? Kerri, what do you think about that?
Well, my opinion really changed after listening to Judge Hippler. I thought his statements were profound, and it flipped things for me a bit. And I thought, yeah, he's right. We should not be giving the killer the attention he craves.
I share the desire expressed by others to understand the why. But upon reflection, it seems to me, and this is just my own opinion, that by continuing to focus on why, we continue to give Mr. Kohberger relevance. We give him agency and we give him power. The need to know what is inherently not understandable makes us dependent upon the defendant to provide us with a reason, and that gives him the spotlight, the attention, and the power he appears to crave.
I also liked what Steve Haley's dad said, how they were able to focus so much on the victims, and everyone around the world knows their names. And hopefully they can ignore Kohberger from now on.
What do you think, Anthony?
I think the reason people wanted to hear from him is because they just want to know why he did this. The investigators said that they still don't know what his motive was. But ultimately, how can you trust anything that he says? So I guess I'm personally fine with it, but I don't blame people if they still want to hear an explanation from him.
And it does sound like the Moscow police released documents from their investigation yesterday after the sentencing was handed down. And one of the takeaways in there was that police said, am I saying this right, Anthony? Police said that when they interviewed him about the case and they started to talk about any motive, he just shut down, right?
When police arrested him in Pennsylvania, we were told that, he answered sort of basic questions, but when they really dug down and tried to ask him about the crimes, Kohberger just shut down, and he didn't speak to them after that. And then, as far as the inmates, they provided some information about like his habits and how he behaved, but they didn't get any information specifically about the crimes from him.
So it does kind of seem like he hasn't spoken to anybody, as far as we know, about any motive. Is that, I mean, so far that seems to be, he's not told anybody what his motive was.
Yeah, it seems to be the case, and I think if he did, we probably would have heard about it by now. But yeah, it seems like he hasn't said anything.
As I mentioned, the Moscow police released lots of documents after the hearing yesterday, and those are online, and anybody can access those. And you mentioned some of the details from that. Was there anything else in those documents, Anthony, that is of note about the case?
Well, I should say that they released hundreds of documents, and I've only just kind of skimmed the surface so far.
You haven't gotten through all of them yet, huh?
Yeah. But just the few that stood out were the documents that shared conversations with the inmates who were confined with him, and then there's some documents from early on in the investigation, right after the crimes were committed, including a description from a Moscow police officer about the crime scene, which goes into pretty graphic detail about the injuries that the victim sustained in the house. And so I caution anyone who's reading through it that you might see some disturbing details like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Anthony and Kerri, you guys were both in Boise at the courthouse. Kerri, you were ended up in the overflow room, limited space in the courthouse, in the courtroom. So you were in the overflow room. What was it like observing the case from that vantage point, for the hearing from there?
Well, it was full, and it was a mix of general public and reporters. It was interesting because the people from the public, they all started lining up at 4 a.m. I sat near a lady who was convinced he was innocent, and there were other people cheering for Olivia. So it was a real mix.
And Anthony, you were in the courtroom. In fact, Anthony served as the pool reporter. Anthony had a reserved seat, provided notes in a Google document to other media outlets, and then his story was shared with those other media outlets. And Anthony did a great job with that. What was it like to do that? Stressful, intense? What were you feeling?
Yeah, it was a little stressful. Basically, my job was to try and capture the details that you might not be able to see on the live stream, because everyone could watch the live stream, but that doesn't always show you everything that's happening inside the courtroom. So I just did my best to try and capture the emotion of the moment and pick up on little details that you might not have seen or heard. And then, it allowed me to kind of have a great view of everything that was going on. I got to see directly at Kohberger and the families, and I just tried to share as much detail as I could.
It looked like it was really emotional out in the audience as well, not just the people testifying. There must have just been emotions flowing the whole time from the crowd.
Yeah, there was a ton of emotion. There were tears and crying, and then there were also applause. I don't know if the live stream picked up on that, but they would also cheer after someone gave their victim impact statement. I think all those people are just very bonded right now, and they're all on this kind of journey to get together. And it's very emotional. And it was also emotional for the attorneys and the judge. At one point, Judge Hippler was fighting through tears as he was speaking. I could see tears in the eyes of the prosecution team. So I think it was emotional for everyone in that room.
And with Judge Hippler, he hadn't, as far as I know, he hadn't betrayed any emotion, that had been completely impartial. That's the first time we saw any emotion from him in this case, right, Anthony?
Yeah, I think this was the first chance for him to say how he really felt about Bryan Kohberger. I think it's the first time I've heard a judge speak like that to a defendant, and so I think that was very cathartic for him.
Kohberger's defense team, led by Ann Taylor, did they just kind of remain sort of stone-faced the whole time?
As far as I could tell, yeah. They barely spoke throughout the hearing. They just let everyone else say their piece. And yeah, I'm sure it was tough for them, but I didn't see any like obvious emotions from them.
It was an interesting detail, and I noticed the live stream cut out just before we saw this, but you witnessed it, Anthony. Kohberger shook their hands at the end of the hearing. What was that interaction like?
Yeah, I noted it because, again, it just speaks to just how little all this seemed to have affected him, at least on the outside. Again, just no emotion from him, very businesslike. He shook their hands and he walked out, and that was it.
Perhaps that's it for this case. Of course, Kohberger's been sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms, no possibility of parole. There is sort of a chance for him to file some sort of appeal, but it doesn't seem like it would really get anywhere. Does it seem like is this case over? Was this the end of it?
We still might find out new details through the unsealed documents that are being released. How revealing those are going to be is the question. Like I said, I don't know if we'll ever figure out why these murders happened, the motive behind them, but there might be some new details that come out. But I think for Kohberger, I think, I guess I don't fully understand the appeal process that you mentioned, but I think the likely thing is that he's just going to spend the rest of his life in prison.
Kerri, it's interesting to hear you say there was a person who seemed to believe in his innocence. People can find conspiracies everywhere, but what could you latch onto that would make you say, oh, no, he's innocent?
One thing the judge said that resonated with me was there is no reasonable explanation. We can search for a motive all we want, but how do you explain this, really, rationally? There isn't one.
Yeah, well put. Well put. All right, guys, thanks for your time and excellent coverage of this. This has been an ordeal. Both of you have been on it. Anthony, in particular, he's been on it since way back November 2022, and this does hopefully seem like the end of the main part of it. As you said, there'll probably still be some details to come out, but this seems like kind of a stopping point for the main proceedings of this. So anyway, thank you guys, and thanks for watching this episode of the Lewiston Tribune Podcast. We'll be back again next week with another new topic, and until then, have a great day. Thanks.